heard it said that a picture, an image, is worth 1,000 words. We all carry many images, many pictures in our heads all the time, not only about everyday things, but even about God and our relationship with God and what God has called us to. We have images, even in our heads, of heaven. The people of the Old Testament had images of God. They had an understanding that there were signs that spoke to them very clearly of God. We think of the rainbow, the sign of the covenant after the flood. We think of the pillars of fire by night as they journeyed through the desert, or the cloud during the daytime that led them. Many of these images, these signs, were distant. Up in the skies, people would have thought the signs of God were in the heavens where God dwelt. We understand too that what God has called us to, we hear in the commandments and the teachings of the church and the Beatitudes, the teachings of Jesus, is an ideal, a sign that may feel to us to be very distant. And yet our own lives seem a long way from that ideal. And so we find ourselves living in this gap between the ideal and what we are created for, that is revealed to us by God, and the human reality that seems to be a long way under that. So we have this gap that makes us feel at times very uncomfortable. Well, what do we do with this gap? Human people for generations have spent their lives trying to climb their way towards God. If God is up there in the heavens, then we climb up towards God, but then we fail. And then we climb again towards God, we fail once again. We're left with this gap. The problem with the gap is that because we don't feel good, we might decide the distance between the ideal and where we are is the thing that is making us feel bad. So let's change the ideal. Let's bring this down to where we are. And what we now end up teaching is something that is little more than the reality that we are living. And the Catholic Church says, no, we can't do that. We can't do that because this ideal is not ours to change. This ideal is what we are created for. The wonderful thing about the sacraments in the Catholic Church is that through the sacraments, it's God who comes to us. This is the journey, the greatest journey of all that happens in the incarnation, God coming into our human reality. And every time we celebrate a sacrament, that's what happens. God comes to us, not only to us, but in the Eucharist, God comes into us. In these days, let's take every opportunity to refresh ourselves in commitment to the sacraments, knowing that in each of the sacraments, the God whom we seek finds us and comes to us.